So I'm going to have Matt come up, and Matt's going to give a little bit of an introduction, and then have a terrific panel of folks, and then we're going to have the Media Post Digital Creative Awards after we have drinks downstairs for the first moment. So Matt Prohaska, come on up, Matt. Thanks, buddy. Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's a real treat and privilege to be standing here. Just for context, in terms of how old I feel, we did a live chat in 1994 at BBDO when Ben Jankowski and I worked together 22 years ago with David Poltrak on CompuServe. It was awesome. We had about 112 people that showed up, and it was text only, but it was talking about digital research. It was very cool, and to see that debate and obviously how much CBS has done globally and across all screens is kind of neat. It's a real privilege again, Barry, to be able to speak and lead this coming panel. Barry and team asked me to give about 5 minutes of a little bit of a primer and context around what the DPAA has asked us to do. And in the audience, kudos again to Steve Grubbs, John Osborne, Robert Gibbs, and Paul Salamone, who helped co-author both the white paper that'll be released by the DPAA shortly, along with the second phase, which has kicked off and will be coming here in fourth quarter. So a little context again to set the stage. Wondering, do we have any Mad Men fans in the room? Any withdrawal? Yeah. Do we remember this scene or these series of scenes? This is from the last year, and where a lot of folks that we encounter, especially in so-called linear or legacy media, still feel today about programmatic. This was the series of episodes where the agency, of course, for those of you on Mars the last 9 years, it's an agency set in the late 60s, early 70s, and this was a series of episodes where they get their first computer. It's that massive Goliath thing in the blue and tan. Those of you who remember what computers looked like back in the day, right? So it took up that entire room, and the guys in the right are the creative department at Draper. And they're a little, let's say, pissed. They're a little, who moved my cheese? They're a little, what is this happening to us? And they're upset for a couple of reasons. One, because there's this concern around, I thought we were a creative agency built by the minds and the spirit of Don Draper and an ideas organization. And who are these people in the media department to be coming in with their fancy computers, talking about automation? And are we going to be out of a job? We've heard those sentiments before from both sellers and buyers in digital media, so-called digital media, along with television and radio and whatnot. The guy on the right goes a little bit off the ledge. We're not going to spoil it for those of you who are going to binge watch in your favorite over-the-top application. But the other reason these guys are upset is because that's the room where they used to come up with ideas and smoke pot. So they were doubly upset and concerned about what was happening to their world. Very similar, master thespian Nicolas Cage. We find a lot of publishers, especially on the selling side, globally, feel like the lead character here, we think still in his best role ever from 28 years ago now, where he's just getting his ass handed to him by Randall Tex Cobb, the big guy in the boots in the back. And it's a great shot and scene where he's being dragged back under the car to just get more of a whooping. And a lot of sellers, especially again in the digital space 2 and 3 years ago, some still in the US if they haven't been as engaged, are feeling like Nicolas Cage, where programmatic is something that's been happening to them, and I've been trying to escape, and God, do I really have to deal with this? And oh my God, all right, I'll come back for more. Hopefully what the white paper that we produced that will be distributed and some of the learnings and teachings when we work with a lot of companies is to show that there are offensive reasons and good, positive reasons for getting into programmatic instead of defensive, reactive, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm done reasons. That might be true as well, but it's more on the optimistic side. And so here's a little bit of way too much text probably for the back of the room, apologies, but some quick highlights of what we've done so far. There's a white paper that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about a couple of the highlights here and some of the key takeaways, but it was done with broad interviews across the entire ecosystem, not just with DPB companies, but with others that frankly should be more engaged in the DPB space. One, I think there were some good announcements aforementioned by Barry and the great folks at Rubicon who smartly had a nice announcement yesterday tied to the outdoor space. But it was buy side, sell side, and then platform side as well. The goal of the white paper was to do a couple of things. One, to provide an introduction for those where programmatic might be a new concept other than what folks have read or heard about at cocktail parties or seen scribbled on the wall, and kind of, what the hell is this? I understand all these terms are being thrown around, but give me a baseline so I can stand on something and get comfortable and confident of how I can move forward leading my organization. And it's also for folks on the front line, if you will, because certainly the board members and the task force who we have to thank for making all of this possible at DPAA. Certainly, they've been very entrenched in programmatic the last 1 to 3 years. A lot of folks, maybe on individual teams at sellers and buyers, have not been as much. So it was meant to provide a baseline understanding for them. Phase 2 that has already kicked off and will be released in Q4 is talking about implementation and how we can actually, you'll hear some phrases around connecting pipes. There are some analogies to plumbing that are stated in the white paper that Jay Sears famously coined a couple years ago, actually talking about smart pipes. How do we get smart pipes hooked up? Very similar to what Dave just said at the end of the panel here, talking about the ecosystem needing to allow buyers and sellers to do their thing a little bit better. So there are some things that have been developed. There is more that is needed. And so we're going to talk about measurement. We're going to talk about standards around how to connect buyers and sellers in a transparent way, allowing for the great systems that already have been built or anyone else looking to come into the DPB space can then build so that, again, all ships rise with the tide moving up and the entire ecosystem expands, as deservedly so. The neat part is that, again, this and this isn't a promotional thing, but for context, this is the 5th white paper we've written for different media, whether it was print, radio, television, digital, or DPB. And I would say that this group and this industry, first of all, the attitude we found has been the best in terms of understanding that this is something that, again, is for optimistic and positive reasons to move forward. And the receptiveness and the willingness to get it and the opportunity, frankly, to capture dollars from 3 different buckets. You have my old friends at the national television buying services and local spot buying services when I was doing that back when I was a toddler in the early 90s. And then you have out-of-home and outdoor buyers, and then you also have digital video buyers. All 3 of those groups could potentially be and are already starting to buy this way. And so it'll be a little bit of an added challenge for sellers to be able to make sure they're addressing all these different moving parts, or at least new ways to capture dollars. But the great part is that there's a lot of energy and opportunity to capture agnostically what DPB is all about that we've heard plenty of today. So some other top-level recommendations here before we move to our esteemed panel. We've planted a flag down and said that we predict north of 30% of all ad sales in the US in the DPB space is going to be done programmatically within 3 years. For context, in the so-called display world, laptop, desktop display, your standard 300 by 250 unit that you might see on your favorite website, by the end of this year, it'll be about 65%, according to eMarketer. And in the mobile web space, and including apps, it'll be about 55%. Mobile was about 15% several years ago. So, we see this kind of neat inflection point right now where it's just starting to happen, and you'll hear from some companies that are actually making that happen in early days. And then we see a bit of a spike and a nice curve coming within probably about 12 to 24 months, growing to a substantial size of just how business is conducted in a few years. So the time we feel is now. It's obvious maybe for an outside company to come in and say, no, you need to do this now. We're not suggesting again that there are billions of dollars being spent this way today, but the companies that get smart and establish relationships now are the ones that benefit later. We've seen this in display, we've seen this in mobile, we've seen this in video, we are seeing it in television, we're just starting to see it in radio as well. So we think the same holds true here. And then the DPAA is in a really unique position, not just with all the great relationships that Barry and Ajay and the whole team have put together with Noah and the gang and the folks in this room. but also because it's such a unique and new time, and the ability to learn from other media, frankly, and have, if you will, not second mover advantage isn't meant to be a slam. It's that you guys are in a position to be able to learn a lot of lessons from what some sellers and buyers did, wasting a lot of time and money over the last 7 years in programmatic in the so-called digital space that can now be leveraged better in DPB. So with that, with all due respect and homage to the great Terry Kawaja of Luma Partners, if some of you have seen references to slides, we've crafted a humble little diagram that feel free to throw darts, attack me afterwards on behalf of our team. We know there are tons of moving pieces here, but the fascinating thing is that you have your so-called traditional ad exchanges. Several have been mentioned here. And many are in the room. We're going to have one on the panel here. And then you have traditional supply-side platforms, or SSPs. Those two boxes on the right are already, if not starting to blend together, because a lot of folks are providing the same services for publishers in the DPB space that they have had, that they have done in so-called digital advertising. You then have a fascinating dynamic that we'll hear from Alan at Assembly, talking about the dynamic of how agencies are organizing themselves and some of the changes happening there, some of the differences between, let's say, Publicis' agencies and MDC. And then you have, as not just from the great David Poltrak, but a lot of companies that have participated actively with leveraging audience data. Traditional folks like Nielsen that many are aware of, and then plenty of newcomers that are supplying things on their own. We don't mean to offend by only putting a company in one box or two boxes or the wrong box today in terms of where they're going to be 3 months from now. But again, hopefully this gives a little bit of a snapshot for companies looking to get engaged of some of the top folks that they should probably talk to on either the buy side, sell side, or in between. So with that, our last pop culture reference before we bring up our friends here to discuss it even further. Again, another master thespian, Keanu Reeves. Can you believe he's 50 years old? Kind of crazy. This movie was 16 years ago. We know that this is not going to be, you may hear a lot of stuff today and feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, but hopefully from the white paper and some continued learnings that we'll be sharing, this will be just a gradual learning process, and ultimately everyone will be able to do well in the dojo. So with that, why don't we, if we can switch slides, please, we'll bring up our esteemed panel. Perfect. So first, representing the buy side, if you will, certainly they're going to get the first questions, and since that's where the money starts, we should bring up Jim Mollica from Under Armour first, and Alan Smith from Assembly, please. We can do golf clap as they're coming up. Thank you. And then, hey, Jim. And then Marta Martinez, who works at one of my favorite alma maters, AOL, otherwise known to some people as Verizon AOL Millennial Media. Marta. No, clap here. And then representing the DPB ad tech ecosystem, they not only produce pretty cool badges, but also have been in this space for quite a while. Andreas Supliotis of Ayuda, and Jody Smith, please, of BroadSign. Thanks. Wherever you want. I'll go on the end. All right, so with that, I know we're standing classically between you and cocktails, so we're going to make sure the content is efficient and effective and high quality. So with that, Jim, let's start on the, again, buyers get the right to go first for sure, since it all starts with you. From a brand perspective, can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of how Under Armour sees the overall media landscape when it comes to benefits of programmatic around efficiency and speed of the transaction and audience targeting and everything else, and then what some of the hurdles might be today for how your team is seeing buying specifically today in the DPB space?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the hurdles are also some of the opportunities, right?
Sure.
So, like the interesting thing is really programmatic is the first time when I started spending more time with our CFO than ever before, right? It was one of those interesting things that the direct and sort of linear correlation to result was something that they found really, really fascinating, right? Looking at it as a marketing investment was sort of the terminology that they started to use. So I used that as a platform to talk about a lot of other things that, I wanted to have on the agenda. So I think it's interesting from that standpoint. I think, some of the challenges that we have are still, the viewability aspect of things, potential fraud, but the biggest one is creativity, right? And too many times you're seeing non-premium placement that just becomes very flat. And for a brand like Under Armour, it's, that is our heart and soul. We are driven by innovation and creativity, and I think we spend more time thinking about ways that we can change that system or break that system, and pushing our great agencies to think through that is one of the big challenges. And I also think that one of the benefits of it is that with sort of the nature of audiences being fractured across the landscape with all of the publishers that started to result, Programmatic allowed us to not only be efficient, but tie that back up, in a really sort of efficient manner to reach these audiences. I think the other big challenge, though, is ultimately, we have a huge divide where it becomes, the programmatic piece right now is looked at as mostly it's an e-com play to sell a product, as opposed to a way to deliver a precise creative message to people in these certain contexts.
So given that Under Armour does one of the better jobs out there, we would say, in terms of establishing brand awareness, and I've been to the offices in Austin and San Fran and seen the motto and the guidebook and the whole deal, and it's fantastic. But also you have key channels where you can drive commerce for your numerous products. Does having a platform for video everywhere, or just the concept of programmatic branding in general, get better? What needs to happen to help the brand awareness side as well? Because it's not just, it's only going to be good for DR and forget about brand. It's an and, right? It can be both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that Optimum Sports, our media agency, has really helped us with, is we pushed really hard for people to reorient themselves around sort of, it's not TV, it's film, and film can have very impactful moments with people in certain contexts, right? So, we are a sports brand at heart, and so thinking about stadiums, thinking about outdoor events, thinking about these other places or contexts provide us with unlimited opportunities to really hit hard. And so I think it's really coming down to, how do we show greater and greater KPIs and metrics around what this is driving to help people get excited, right? Because it's very, very easy to say, follow the old adage, no one ever got fired for buying IBM, right? So it's more TV, as opposed to saying, well, let's look at this as a film-based model, and where can there be moments of impact across that?
Nice. Alan, is that how you survey the media ecosystem across your various clients? Show off, first of all, some of the top clients that you've got, so we've got some context, but also help dive a little deeper, since there are a ton of companies that pitch you to be able to hook their pipes and their great marketplaces into your platforms. Explain for the folks maybe around what kind of platform the agency uses today, and how the people use it, please.
And I think even in the last couple of days, it becomes even more complex, which I can talk a little bit about. So Assembly is a full service media agency with clients like AMC, Fox Sports, Timberland, Vans, Expedia. So a kind of a breadth of clients with different types of challenges. I think one of from a technology perspective, I think video everywhere is a really simple concept in terms of the fact that in theory we should be able to deliver video across many screens, but I think in practice the challenge can often be that different technologies do it better or worse in different ways. So, for instance, for some clients, what we have is a challenge that is very locally focused. And what we find is, if I'm focusing on mobile, or even actually, our digital out-of-home platform, things like Vistar or things like Adelphic become really important because they think about lat long, which things like DoubleClick do not. But in saying that, like I was saying, in the last couple of days, DoubleClick have started to deliver digital out-of-home placements in London. And that's kind of thrown the whole concept of what technology do you pick kind of up in the air. And I think that's that's just kind of it's definitely a specific consideration that you think about as an agency. At the moment, what we're doing is we really have platforms that think about, the different challenges specific to clients, really, is the truth. But at its core, what we're really trying to do is create consistency in operational practices, but also then kind of data. I think you raised a great point, Jim, which was around that can be used for brand. I think one of the interesting things about programmatic that is going to happen is you can start to use programmatic for brand, for things like managing frequency, especially in kind of digital place-based. There's probably a lot of wastage. If you think about the amount of media that's bought and is not considered who you're actually addressing it to, the more addressable we make that media, the kind of more we'll be able to control that waste, think about frequency, and contextualize a message to an audience. So I think it's all ahead of us.
A real quick follow-up. My point about the 3 different types of media buyers that could actually buy DPB and are buying DPB today. How is that structured, and how do you see the classic silo versus generalist evolving across maybe not just your agency, but the whole holding company?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. So today, and I think traditionally, if I look at our holding company, we have Assembly, and our sister agency is Endplay, which is an out-of-home agency. And what we've effectively done is partnered with Vistar to create a digital out-of-home kind of programmatic buying platform. The execution of that platform actually kind of sits with Endplay, although it's increasingly kind of being shared across Assembly. And that's probably intentional. So within Assembly, what we have is a programmatic team. So we've moved away from this kind of trading desk model more to an in-house team, mostly because we realize that more media is going to be transacted through programmatic in general. And so there's a greater emphasis on execution across channels. Almost channels in its simplest form goes away in many cases. And so you think more about audiences and planning, less about kind of channel silos. So I think that model is going to evolve, but that's how we see it happening.
So as that model evolves, the ad tech platform or stack of services evolves as well. And Marta is intentionally in the middle here because you, as overseeing global marketing, you have teams that sit on both sides, if you will. So help us understand the evolution around AOL's positioning to get there, not just around the whole VAM armada, but you guys would be one of the poster children for buying your way into, when you look at the Adapt TV acquisition, you look at Millennial, you look at, what do all those pieces, other than having your product team go nuts and stitching that all together and having fantastic challenges, what's the end game? I mean, is the goal for Verizon AOL to be all screens, all people globally, one platform, done, here it all is?
Yeah, I think that if I was to put in one simple sentence, the goal is to be able to target people and not devices, and to bring marketers the opportunity to holistically look at a consumer independent on the device that they're accessing, the format of advertising that they're accessing. And that requires a lot of what you were calling plumbing in the prior session. There is a lot of technologies that need to come together that have lived separately, whether that is television, display, video, or mobile, that we now have all under one technology. And then there is the need of bringing them all together through a measurement system that allows advertisers to understand what's driving the value for my brand, and how do I allocate across the different channels, the media across the different channels, so that I can drive my metrics, whether those are brand awareness or they are point of sales metrics. And I think that's what takes you to the CFO, and what makes marketers not a cost center, but an investment center. And the conversation then turns and puts the CMO back at the C-suite, being able to drive growth for the company, as opposed to being subject to the cost cutting and the procurement that have been driving a lot of what I know from the agency perspective we have to deal with in the industry.
Understood. One quick follow-up then. The opportunity to leverage mobile data in the acquisition, not just of Millennial and having that marketplace tied in, but obviously with your corporate parent now, having just a little bit of knowledge about first-party data with its customers here in the U.S. You guys made some announcements just yesterday, I think, about making statements saying we're going to be keeping open and not have as much of the going back to the original AOL and Yahoo and the old walled gardens of the mid to late 90s. Help us understand the strategy of leveraging leveraging first-party data relevant to the DPB space? Because we heard some pitches, some great pitches in the tech tank earlier today around individual companies that are looking to kind of feed audience data in, to tie in the social aspect, as David eloquently said, tied with the transaction. Is that on the roadmap for Verizon AOL, or kind of, we're going to leverage in some other media channels first?
So one of the challenges we'd had, as all of the technology that you saw in that Luma Inspire slide that you guys have put together, is as an industry, regardless of whether you're looking at it as from the buy side as an advertiser or from the sell side as a publisher, we have now a very high technology tax. There is a lot of different companies that we need to pay a lot of money to in each one of the different portions of the ecosystem, so that when a publisher media gets into only 30% of the value of media goes all the way to advertiser because the value gets eaten. If you put that together with a tendency that we see now coming, which is this one of very walled gardens, where the data, where a lot of advertisers are saying we're sending data in, but we're not seeing any of the enriched data come back, so that we can understand how those programs are affecting our brand. We see a huge opportunity for an open media ecosystem that is consolidated, consistent, and it's one, where all of the pieces are together and there is no tech tax, right? So that the technology tax...
No tech tax?
The technology tax is minimized as opposed to that 60%.
You're not saying you're giving your platform away for free today here at the DPAA. Oh, okay.
That's right.
No.
That's
All right,
right.
sorry. Barry, we tried to make some news. Sorry.
That's right. But I'm saying that there is a huge difference between that being 60% of the value that you generate in the ecosystem and shrinking
There's some room.
Something that, exactly. There is a lot of room for improvement, right? There is a lot of room for improvement. There is a lot of work for data to go in and out of the platforms, for the ability to connect with open APIs with different pieces of technology, whether a company is already working with a specific DMP, DSP, SSP, attribution provider. There is so many different, all of the verification parties. We do believe that we are and that we have to power a very open ecosystem so that there is a lot more fluidity. So if you reduce all of the friction that exists with all of those technology taxes, then you make it easier. Then what happens is programmatic becomes, let's remember, it's not a strategy. Programmatic is the tactic. And marketing is marketing, and the marketers are the one that owns the value, that own the value of the brands. What we're doing from the programmatic perspective is allowing marketers to leverage all of the signals that a consumer is living as they go through their day in this digital world, right? Yep. They start with a cell phone, and then they might go to an OTT device or to a television. They might go then to a desktop, to a tablet. They are telling us what they want and what their consumption habits are through what they're doing in all of those devices. And being able to leverage that data is extremely valuable for marketers. Yep. And by doing that, then we go back to marketing, which is how this all started.
Well,
right?
We should be doing. Yeah, we used to joke when I was at the New York Times that we'd spend 12 out of every 30-minute sales call talking about programmatic sales just around plumbing, instead of actually talking about marketers' problems and how to solve them. And oh, by the way, the plumbing should take care of itself. But it was just so fascinating and complex and all that. So Jody, take us inside your role in product leadership at BroadSign. How do you build to, everyone talks about you in hockey, you want to skate to where the puck's going. How do you build your roadmap in this ecosystem today in DPB, just in the US, to satisfy the needs of sellers and buyers?
Sure. It's actually pretty straightforward, and I think you touched on it a second ago when you said that programmatic, we seem to concentrate on that when that's the solution as opposed to the problem. The problem is, from an advertiser's point of view, you're trying to reach a particular audience, you want to go after a particular segment, or you want to reach particular goals, and that's the problem, that the supply side is not able to provide you that in an easily digestible format. The panel before this was saying, all screens are the same, and trying to make the argument that we could have a unique currency for each of the plays that goes out there, whereas obviously the networks that BroadSign represents, they each have the unique value proposition. An impression that's in a gym, for example, for Under Armour, has more value than for in the back of a bar or something like that. So standardizing that audience and allowing it to bringing that tech solution to actually solve the problem of how do we reach the audience we're targeting, that's kind of where BroadSign comes in. And to answer your question of, how does BroadSign get to our roadmap, we talk to agencies and we try and figure out what you need, and we talk to our networks and we try and figure out how to enable them to provide that information.
So without getting too proprietary, what's one thing that the buying community is saying to you that is necessary, that is next on the roadmap? Not giving away too many trade secrets, but what's a gap? Where is it hard that you're seeing that you're working towards solving?
It's the word that always pops up is a standard. So I mean, some kind of universal way of buying. And I think anything that we come up with in order to be able to provide that needs to take into account a level of standardization, so you can buy simple things like impressions and locations and something that pops up a lot. But there also needs to be a very flexible and configurable layer on top of that that allows the supply side to actually bring the real value to you. Just knowing that it's an impression is irrelevant if you don't have the contextual of, it's in a gym, or it's in a bar, or stuff like that. Actually understanding the audience, so you don't just go after the lowest hanging fruit and buy impressions, actually go after the really valuable part of the audience. That's what we need to facilitate.
Cool. So Andreas, you have the advantage, deservedly so, not just because you sponsor the lanyards, but you've been in this space for a while. Give us, throw a dart at what we had claimed here in terms of percentage of spend, and I mean, you're one of a handful of companies that's been in the trenches building from scratch, specific for this space. So give the folks a sense of reality around what's actually happening. Again, no need to share numbers, but can you give some examples around the liquidity, if you will, to borrow a financial term? How much buying and selling is going on here, and where directionally is it coming from, at least from the buy side? What pockets of buyers are participating today?
So we've been a student of the space for about 13 years. That's when we founded the company. And when we first started into the space, it was static at home pretty much.
Right.
So we've watched the industry grow up into digital and now really get into a programmatic ecosystem. And I think what's really, really amazing is the opportunity comes by intentionally blurring the lines of how we enter into the demand side of the world and go into the online and display advertising and video advertising. So, what we're really looking at is, what we do is we help media owners connect their supply to digital demand. And we're intentionally straddling that world. So we believe that it doesn't really make sense to build proprietary DPAA DSPs. We think it makes a lot more sense to see how we can plug into existing digital DSPs that are trafficking billions of dollars today. And I think that that's where we're witnessing a lot of action. So to answer your question, we are getting a lot of excitement about some of the test campaigns we've been running. So we've run about 10 test campaigns so far with real significant revenue flowing through these pipes. We've built pipes to some of the highest profile digital demand tools, and those tools are being used to buy from the actual platform. And in terms of where I see revenue growing, I think that Barry mentioned a number this morning, a different number out there today. I think somewhere between there.
We're supposed to probably skew a little more aggressive, and then Barry has a little more perspective on the industry and the players involved, and so would probably course correct appropriately.
Sure, but what's interesting is what we're seeing is the following. To us, programmatic means three things. It's the procurement of buying and selling of ads. Then there is the second piece, which is often left out in the conversation when we speak about programmatic, which is really the ad serving piece. And I think that that's where we have to really have a lot of work to do. So if you want to go after new revenue streams and take away revenue from digital dollars, you have to speak really smartly about how you target people in real time.
Yeah, the addressability is one of the largest challenges here, right? I mean, this is very different from putting an ad on mobile web here when you're talking about an ecosystem that was created in its own self-contained location or series of locations, right? Having to patch that together, not simple, easy, quick work, right?
I agree. We're treating this as a huge computer science problem, trying to figure out which screen we should activate, where, and when. And we're tapping into cellular data to do that. We're working with DPAA networks who are interested in deploying beacons throughout their networks, that they want to build their own proprietary DMP, that's their secret sauce, and how they can offer an effective ad serving strategy. It's a lot more targeted. We're interested in activity like AOL and what Rubicon is doing, what DoubleClick is doing, because that's where we really, really straddle the world. So I think it's all about connecting the amazing DPAA supply into the existing digital demand spectrum.
Cool. 2 minutes left. I want to save at least one, certainly for questions, but always give buyers first and last word. Thank you, Andreas. So, Jim, what do you think of what you've just heard from our friends here? And I mean, again, you don't need to make statements like X% of UA globally is moving here if these two things are done, and then we could scurry. But you could do that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's we would like nothing more than to be able to deliver more dollars to this end solution. Absolutely. And the challenges we see is we've talked a lot about it, and I think you were the only one that hit on the enriching with first-party data for us, because we have a whole lot of it with 155 million people sitting in our ecosystem with those 4 apps that we have. And I think it's great to have context and film and experience in these environments, but it's even better if I map on top of that where you are in your relationship with us, right? Then it becomes super, super powerful. This is not easy to do in these circumstances, but I think that can be game changing. I think much like some of the other problems that you have with digital-based advertising, if we don't start to create an attribution system that values the influence of this market and of this delivery, we're never going to move outside of this, like chasing pennies in a space.
Wouldn't you say the DPB space is probably similar to a few other media, been penalized because so many people go on last click, last view? There might be one company that does billions of dollars in search advertising, let's say, that maybe has gotten a nice lift as a result of that.
Well, I mean,
no disrespect.
Yeah, the argument is it's like giving the cash register credit for the sale, right?
Yeah.
And so we talk about that all the time, and it's madness. But it's, in a previous life, I ran a campaign right here in Times Square that had a component. We decided we'd have some triggers to it. And because there was such a limited amount of people that were using the trigger, and it was just an add-on, it wasn't a mainstay of the execution, people started to criticize it. Like, but it's in Times Square, and the impression and the creative, it was amazing. It was
Pretty
just
good.
a little cherry on top. But everything got boiled down to, well, how many respondents did we actually have? So I think that's another big challenge that we have.
Understood. Well, a couple of challenges also is jamming in all the 47 other questions we want to have when, again, we have cocktails and well-deserving awards going. Do we want to do questions?
If you want to go a little bit longer, Ajay, hopefully that's okay. This is
Yeah?
an area that we're all fascinated by. You're all
5, 10.
doing a great job.
Cool.
Take a few more minutes, I'll tell you when to stop, and then maybe we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. All
Done.
right?
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Any objections? Good. Continue, s'il vous plaît.
Cut to people walking up and leaving, but not saying they have objections. No, appreciate the opportunity at 5:11. Very cool. It's been a full day for everyone of great stuff. So, all right, so we're going back. All right, so Alan, the attribution piece. Let's dive into that a little bit more. I mean, we have this slide. We talk about the 4 horsemen of a digital publisher apocalypse, and
Right.
just how hard it is to be a seller today. When you look at, for some, mobile is a problem because they have display flat and monetized at 1x, and mobile is at half an x, and they're freaking out because that's triple their traffic now. Viewability, challenge. Attribution, challenge. Maybe fraud, maybe ad blocking. You don't have to go into each of those, but give some of the benefits of how maybe lessons learned around early days of programmatic can tick off some of those boxes, and the benefit of not really having to deal with at least a couple of those challenges when it comes to the digital place-based space.
And I think the good thing is you're not first. So as in, I think display got this really hard, and actually, to be honest, still gets this hard.
Yeah.
When you look at ad fraud, viewability, it's a huge problem in that space. And I think what you're seeing in that space is a push for more premium inventory, and it's pretty explicit. The world, programmatic was kind of a world of audience buying. Context was almost in the beginning a secondary thing, and it was about audience. And I think what you're seeing more is agencies, brands are trying to focus on premium inventory, which means actually in some cases they're going back to thinking about individual portfolios of sites because it's exactly.
I mean, like it's been happening all along.
Yeah, it's the only way they can guarantee some sort of quality. So I think that's always a big consideration. I think the attribution side of it is becoming really, really interesting. I mean, even today I had a conversation about how do the fact that we can now attribute the impact of TV through through digital measurement is a really, really interesting thing. And that's something we're working on quite now. And I think, what enables that is it is programmatic, it is technology. And the reason for that is mostly because agencies themselves now are using, in past worlds, they were using kind of very simple data to be able to understand kind of causality between channels. Now what you see is agencies are using kind of log level data from ad servers, from programmatic platforms. They're able to understand the delivery at the most individual device level, and then the kind of the path to purchase or the path to brand exposure, and be able to understand impact. And I think the great thing is, because a lot of that work is already being done or is being developed, place-based advertising coming into that ecosystem could actually be a benefit. Because I think today you're right in that it's very last touch or has been. I think we're evolving, and certainly I see a big evolution.
To help related to that, dispel a myth, if you don't mind, about people, and I want to turn to Marta. David Roth gave a great presentation talking about the power of algorithms, and one of the myths that we talk about all the time, but it's always better when you hear it from leading agencies, is that, this means that humans are going to be minimized, go away in some places. That seems like you need a couple of smart humans at least to be able to analyze that data and still go through. And it's just, the job description might change a little bit going forward, but this isn't machines take over the world and some Will Smith movie, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. So I guess how we think about it is the traditional media agency model has very much been a kind of simple triangle where most people are spending their time on very administrative tasks, very repetitive things, and it doesn't add a lot of value to a brand. I think what you're seeing is, and what we're working towards is kind of that flipped on its head, where the automation of things is enabling us as an agency to use more of our head, is to be able to think more about things. Think about how do we create these opportunities for brand impact, better communications planning, rather than thinking about, how do we just kind of, fill out Excel spreadsheets. And I think that implicitly what's happening in that is you see the mix of people with an agency changing. So there are more people, there are more analysts, more data scientists, and kind of, and I think that's a really, really great evolution, and that's certainly something we're seeing.
All right, so Marta, a challenge, this wasn't covered. Since we're into overtime now officially, this wasn't covered on the prep, and so we're going into improv mode here. So I want to test the theory. Someone who's been around for quite a while, take us back to, remember at your Media Math days when, programmatic was the greatest buzzword and all, and we always give credit to the smart guy, Eric Picard, who's now at Media Math, who created the word about 5 years ago. We have this theory that we state that's tweetable and whatever, that there are two words that go away by the end of probably 2018, programmatic and digital, because they're just part of doing business. I mean, when all media becomes digital, there isn't a separate category for that. When maybe not all buying becomes programmatic, but maybe there are programmatic methods in even the greatest creative sponsorships that you would pitch Under Armour for 8 figures doing a global entity. If you're with a major sports franchise, there could be some data-infused speed of the transaction, right? Comment, is that just nuance and nice panel chat, or is that a cultural change in terms of how media and buying and selling evolves here?
No. If you think about automation and what automation's done to every single industry, and what internet technology has done to transform the music industry or the video industry from the consumer perspective, and so many more, right? Like the hotel industry, so many, every single one of them has been affected by technology, and so has advertising. So today, we started calling it programmatic. I remember when we were trying to decide how do we call this thing? Is it RTV? Is it programmatic? What is the term that people will understand? It is just true automation. And make no mistake, if something can be automated, it will be automated. There is no question about it, right? The question is what will it happen? And as an industry, it's a pretty radical transformation from an industry that many years in the math men and the math women, it was an industry that happened with Martinez and phone calls and faxes going back and forth. It's pretty radical. So the truth is, programmatic is one of the words and one of the technology that has allowed us to get there. I would actually argue that everything is going to be programmatic. Like we all drive from point A to point B in cars and no longer in horses or other things, right? Because evolution just happens.
Yep.
And that at one point we will not talk about digital because all of the media will be digital and we'll be able to run marketing based on all of the data signals. And that marketers will be data scientists and will be people with very different backgrounds than what we have seen in the past, and it will be, for sure, it will be different from what we have today, but it will richer and it will be more, let's let the data tell a story, and let's get back to storytelling and build marketing programs that can engage with consumers at a level that, that hasn't been seen before.
Jody, classic, one of the last panel questions. Get prediction time. Take one of your places, one of your customers, one of your locations, and take us through that consumer experience that BroadSign is working towards solving or advancing in 12 months.
In 12 months?
I am staring at what screen? Where am I? What am I looking at? What am I holding, and what is that experience different in 12 months?
Before I do that, I just want to say, hearing the automation part is music to my ears, and I'm guessing yours as well. I mean, that's basically the entire reason our companies exist, is in order to give you more time to do the creative stuff. And I mean, you mentioned it, Excel. I'm on a personal warpath to remove Excel from this industry. Yeah. Every time I see people using Excel, it's like, I gotta fix that.
Mission for God.
On PowerPoint.
PowerPoint, it works for the simple things, but yeah, there's lots of answers to that. I'll start on Excel. I'll get to PowerPoint later. So what does the experience look like from the consumer's point of view or from my client's point of view?
Take your client.
My client, for me, I mean, programmatic basically represents making their inventory available easily. That's the biggest thing. Right. So the Excel sheets are all about dealing with avails and when can I get this inventory available. So from the network operator's point of view, making that easily available, that's their job. From the agency point of view, being able to then, match the inventory available to their requirements. That's where the automation comes in. That should be a couple of clicks. This shouldn't be a 3-hour, 6-hour science project every time somebody asks a question. It should be instantly available. And I think with the audience data coming in and the inventory systems becoming more and more accessible through APIs and the like, that should be a lot simpler. From the end user's point of view, they're not going to know any of this goes on. If you go outside into digital and you tell them that, in a 1/10 of a second, their page view has gone out and been put up to bid in 20 different places, most people have no idea. So from their point of view, it's just going to magically work, and they're going to go, wow, they got me that ad at the right time. Yeah. I was in the taxis in NYC, and Barry's face came up for the DPAA ad.
That was fixed. That was him actually sketching on a bunch of screens. That was the ad server was a little more manual there.
I was sat there knowing what I know going, was that just random or is he tracking me? I was getting paranoid.
He had beacons from all of us when we all dropped in and followed. So Andreas, take us through the rest of that consumer profile, and let's bring in some of the concerns around that Jim, I'm sure, is facing as a global company, and that as you look at your customers and the global ecosystem, the differences between, let's say, Europe's laws today and what you can and can't do around something as simple as a cookie in that world. Does that create pause? Take us through what are consumers just going to be fine with this? Because it seems like generationally, just not stereotyping, but just leveraging some data, it seems like younger folks tend to be cooler with this and just being a little more open with their own data and understanding the game that's being played here. Are you building your systems assuming that there's going to be an open ecosystem and consumer acceptance around this, or do you have to protect against regulators or any other defensive things that would kind of put some handcuffs on?
Sure.
Not criminal handcuffs, just tie you down.
Usually when we have conversations about ad serving driven by beacon or decisioning based on carrier data, we tap into cellular carriers that aggregate 15 billion data points per day. And that's kind of spooky in the sense that there's a computer science algorithm that's figuring out what the statistical propensity is of 18 to 49 female right now, and ads are being served. So we encounter those conversations, but we get over them. I think the media, there's such a drive from the media owners to be able to offer this because they know that their clients, the agencies, want this really badly. So we've gotten around a lot of those sort of issues. And from a consumer's perspective, I think the word is, it's surprising and delightful to sort of have a more targeted story around me. And I'm always sort of impressed how that can work. Jody's example of Barry in the cab is a great one. There was many campaigns in Europe where, if you were driving a Lexus, they would tell you, don't drive a Lexus, drive a Porsche, along the Autobahn and so forth. I think that's surprising and delightful for consumers to see. I think it'll be very well received.
Yeah, especially, those of us that are old enough to remember the interwebs when it was in the mid to late 90s. Remember when you'd get either Punch the Monkey banner ads, or you would get, gray background and, oh, hey, your computer's on fire. Click here to rescue your browser. And it looked like a Microsoft icon, and it wasn't, and it was selling some schlock. We're way past that. So, the bar, fortunately, has been raised in terms of consumer acceptance. Now, the Onion makes a joke about, retargeting too many shoes, and we've gone mainstream, and okay, those are the problems. Not bad compared to where we were. So imagine just a couple years from now, it'll probably get even better, right?
Yeah, the media owners are asking us, how do you do frequency capping? That's complicated. That means they have a drive towards having a deeper understanding on insights. And what's exciting, I'll just close on this, is that when networks can offer this level of insights, they can charge a higher CPM. And that's a strong message that we resonate, that if you use our platform, aside from the typical amazing Nielsen demographics or TAB demographics, you can also now target people that have been to a specific retail store in the last month, that have a certain loyalty program and so forth. When you start adding those level of insights, you can successfully charge a CPM. And I think this industry is really striving towards being able to charge and justify a higher CPM cost in comparison to mobile.
Right. So hopefully we did a little educating, a little entertaining, and it sounds like another myth that was busted in terms of only being cheap CPM.